So the topic is labor inventory and workflow management. And if you come over from the panel discussion, which was super interesting, we want to talk about the how to implement that so we reach the goal that no tech is over or underutilized and weekly revenue goes up. And I have the honor to introduce a co-host, John Long. Thank you, John, for joining.
Thank you for having me on.
And if you wouldn't mind spend 2 minutes on talk about your shop maybe and yourself,
Yeah,
that would be
definitely.
awesome.
I'm a partner in Schertz Auto Service just outside of San Antonio, Texas. We've been in business for a little bit over 15 years now. So, and it's currently we have one location that is a 8-bay location or 8-bay inside with 7 lifts, and we have an awning that spans the length of the building. So we have about another 8 to 9 bays outside we could utilize as needed. Since we are in Texas, we can pretty much utilize that throughout the whole entire year for the most part. But we have an AC shop, so our techs don't like to work outside anymore. They like to stay inside and stay nice and cool on that. We've steadily grown over the years from a 2-man operation. It was just myself and one of my partners, David, who's now our shop foreman, to now, we have 3 service advisors, production manager, another office assistant, and then 7 techs. So we've got quite a large operation that we've grown into, and a lot of that has been, thanks to Auto Vitals over the past 6 years or so that we've been using them.
Thank you, John. And by the way, if you have questions for John or for me, fire away in the chat. I have it open here and take a look, and we also have a moderator. So we will be able to answer your questions. We don't want to make that a one-way street only. And we have also dedicated 15 minutes at the end. So the whole thing is 45 minutes. So 30 minutes is presentation, 15 minutes is Q&A. But fire away from the beginning if there's any question. So what are we trying to accomplish here? You all know service advisors are superheroes because they manage everything. And especially everything means often unexpected events, interrupts, which have to be managed. And what we want to talk about today is if they really have to walk around that a lot, and how can we help service advisors making decisions faster, more founded on data if possible, and go into a world where with all the technology available, the service advisor does not need to leave the counter because the data available to make decisions are right on the screen and updated in real time. And not to forget, this is nothing new. We all have accustomed to use a smartphone more as a computer than a phone, actually. And so we're just trying to level the playing field here and not only turn the digital communication to the motorist on, especially in times like these, but also use the same technology to create a higher efficiency. And because techs have a tablet and the service advisor has a workflow technology. That's the topic of this presentation. And I want to give you 2 examples. The first one is about Adam Banchik, who is in the panel discussion right now talking about the same topic. And I just want to show you here his growth over the, what is it here, from 16 to 19. I mean, this is just incredible. I mean, average weekly revenue by 140%. That's a pretty awesome result, right? And the icing on the cake is actually that this revenue increased a lot more than he hired new staff. So I think if you do the math right, he increased his revenue per employee by $100,000 annually. I mean, tell me a business where this is possible. Revenue per employee is $100,000 higher in the course of a little bit more than 3 years, right? That's possible, right? It's not just a snake oil sales pitch. It's possible. Adam has done it. And since we have John on, this is actually a presentation we gave a while ago at the Digital Shop Conference in 2019. So here you see John's team, and that is incredible. You know, very impressive, right? Beginning was the ARO at 217, 58% increase. That's a time frame between mid of 16 and end of 18, right?
Yeah.
So it's a year ago.
Yeah, just to interject real quick, that ARO is
Yes.
a little misleading because we do state inspections and they're $7 tickets, and we do about 50 of those a week. So when you take those out, that ARO is actually closer to probably about 550. It went from about 350 to 550 when we take those state inspections out.
Thank you for clarification. And here's the weekly revenue, right? And so we're going to talk a little bit about specialization also in the shop. And you can see John almost doubled the weekly revenue during that time. Again, if you just read that in a book or in a presentation, it sounds like too good to be true. And if I'm not mistaken, John, that's also without increasing the sales stuff behind
No, we pretty much had the same staff as we did then to now. I did add another service advisor, and that's the only reason why we did that is because we're opening up a second location here soon. So I had the chance to bring somebody on. So we brought them on, and they're just kind of a luxury at the moment. You know, without them, we'd still be in the same situation.
This is pretty cool. So let's talk about what is more a detailed view and how to achieve this. And this is the summary, right? This is kind of the recipe to cook this fantastic meal. And we have stressed it now for the last 2 hours in the panel. You need a process. We happen to call it a digital standard operating procedure, DSOP, and which includes a clear role definition, and you write it down and enforce it. And some of you probably have listened to our Digital Shop Talk radio, and no coincidence, I picked this picture because John coined the phrase you have to pass the hit the bus test in your shop. And maybe John, you talk about this a little bit, what you have done there.
Yeah, well, first, I can't take credit for that phrase. It's something that I ripped off and duplicated from another shop owner that I'm in another group with. But it makes perfect sense. You have to have procedures in place that where if any one person in your group, whether it be yourself as an owner, service advisor, anyone happens and walks out the door and for some reason gets hit by a bus, everything's going to continue on without fault. Everybody's going to know exactly what's going on in every single process of your business. Because if you did get hit by the bus, didn't have those procedures in place, what's going to happen? Everything's going to come to a grinding halt. And with those procedures in place, your business can, still continue on. I mean, we all have those interruptions. People get sick. We all know this. So, I mean, people are always out in our business. So like I said, you have to have those clear defined roles, clear defined procedures. So if something does happen, you can continue on without interruption.
Thank you.
Okay.
Consider specialization. So if you were in the panel discussion before, the traditional service advisor skills really require such a broad spectrum in skills. It's really hard to find, right? So, service advisors who are super outgoing, highly people to people engaged, have those sales skills, are very rarely at the same time super meticulous and enjoy doing, precise estimates, run a structure, be, great in administrating or managing things, right? So there's the question, is there an opportunity to separate those skills and have people who enjoy being meticulous and people who enjoy being salespeople as separate roles? And John will talk about this throughout the presentation, what he has done in his shop when we talk about workflow management. But a good way of separating is, keep sales separate from estimating and have a production manager. And last but not least is shop meetings and culture. We talked about this on the panel. How can you really enforce a role you have defined if that's not accompanied by regular meetings where in a trusted culture data is shared and measures to improve can be talked about in the open with the team, right? It's not probably helping if, as Frank says, the shop meeting turns into a shop meeting. Then it's so much harder to implement anything new. So those are the top 3 things we like to recommend. And John, do you have any things to add?
No, those are all 3 great things to start with, and we can kind of expand on some of those as we go throughout here.
Thank you. So service advisors get interrupts, right? And if we really get down to what's going on for what is so hard to do, especially in a paper-based shop, is a service advisor doing the skill, doing the job completely correct, has to actually know at any point in time the status of parts delivery, vehicle process, tech and bay availability to create the maximum and manage the maximum output of build hours produced, right? That's a daunting task if you don't have help, because what it really would mean is any interrupt which creates a new situation would in theory force the service advisor run around, get a new status from every tech and or parts supplier or all of the above. And that would, by the way, I'm not making up those 20,000 steps. We have a customer whose service advisor is a marathon runner and he counts religiously his steps, and he ran or walked 20,000 steps a day before Smart Flow. After Smart Flow, it dropped to 4,000. We didn't do him a big favor in his marathon training. He had to run those steps outside of work, but it helped him quite a bit. But if you, in theory, really do that, lots of service advisors do then the following. They plan the day based on how busy they are and not how busy the techs are and could be, right? So there's a certain limitation if there is not all information available at your fingertips to make those decisions, then just to survive and do the multitude of jobs a service advisor has to do, there will be simplifications. We all do that. It's not limited to a service advisor, but it leaves money on the table. And that is where the technology can help. But we are all humans, right? Service advisors actually get a kick out of being heroes, right? There's a certain pride associated with it, right? And so, John, I stole that from your presentation at the Digital Shop Conference. When John introduced a new process with a new specialization, you had to ease your service advisor into it. Could you share that story?
Yeah, I set out to solve an issue because we had a productivity issue in our shop, and it wasn't because we didn't have the work. It was because my service advisors were just overwhelmed with work. They couldn't get it out to the techs, and the techs weren't staying busy enough, even though we had the cars on the lot. Um, so after, going back and forth and trying a few things, I came to them with another idea that I had that, I was going to take some things away from them. And a couple of the things that I was going to take away was, doing the estimates, reviewing the inspections and editing the inspections, handling parts, handling returns. I was going to take all that away from them, and they didn't want it because, like Uwe has mentioned, most of our service advisors want to do everything. They want to handle everything, and they want to be the supermen or the superwomen, for us. And most of them are. Uh, so after some discussion, I said, look, give me a month. Let's try it for a month. Let's go to my way. Let's just see what happens. It took 2 days for one of my service advisors to come back to me and said, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. I never want to go back to doing it. And, that service advisor is still with me. And he says to me to this day, he goes, you could not double my pay for us to go back to doing it the same way. You couldn't. I finally have the time that I need to spend with the customers and to take my time with them so we can do a proper sales presentation, do a proper sales process. Before they didn't have the time. They're just doing way too much stuff, and taking that away from them has increased our production because I've got one person that's their role all day long is to write estimates, edit the inspections, and deal with the parts. And it's not a new role in this industry. There's others that have had it for a long time. It's not that I'm reinventing the wheel. It's just something that was at the right time, was right for our shop. And I can see where it could be beneficial to others at even a smaller scale than what we are, to grow and to keep your techs busy instead of having, 2 service advisors. Maybe have 1 service advisor and 1 estimator. That way they're both aren't worn out by the end of the day. They're not running around with their hair on fire all day long, because we were doing a disservice to our advisors, and we were just beating them up day in and day out and wearing them down. And I didn't feel right about that. I didn't feel good.
And makes total sense. So there's a lot of reason also behind, we have always done it this way. And as we all know, habit changes are really hard, especially if the outcome is kind of unclear and not proven, right? So in your particular case, right, it seemed to have been proven after a few days because they felt already the benefit. What we also think is an awesome way to do it is use what we call quick wins to illustrate progress. So for example, agree on a goal of selling alignments, for example, and use, this is how many alignments we have sold last month. And so now we are tracking just alignments in terms of canned jobs or service packages, and then show everybody the numbers, how it increases, right? That's an awesome way to illustrate progress. John, can you share what in particular this one service advisor experienced? Was it more sales? in a particular way, or
It was just the
meaning certain jobs?
just the overall sales process. I mean, most our advisors or our advisors should be salesmen. Salesmen
Yes.
naturally want to talk to people and they don't want to be interrupted and they want to continue throughout their process. And if they get interrupted, that puts them off track. And they can't continue where they are. They need to be fluid. They want to talk. They need to have that time to build those relationships with those customers. Because once you build that relationship with that customer, the chances of you selling something are so much greater if you connect on that customer with a personal level. And if your service advisors are doing everything and they keep getting interrupted every 5 seconds for something else, or they know they're going to get interrupted, they can't build that time. They don't have the time to build that relationship.
Yeah. Thank you. So the top 3 best practices for success, and we're going to go into examples for Schertz, is use the TVP tech view and the workflow view and make sure the tags mark the jobs as completed. And then as an outlook, if we have the time, either in this session or in the follow-up session, I will talk about the task manager to manage interrupts properly. But let's start with the tech view. John, if this is, a screenshot of your tech view, if you could share with us how you use it. And by the way, for everybody, this is how the new TVPX, as we dubbed it, looks. It's very similar to the old way, just more user-friendly, more special markers, and so on. And John has been a TurboShop user now for a few weeks. John, fire away.
Yeah, we kind of use our tech view as a scheduler in sense for our techs. Another thing about our shop that many people don't know and many people probably don't operate that we do is all my techs are on an hourly wage. They're not flat rate. We work together as a team. I've got specialties. My techs have certain specialties themselves. And just because a certain tech looked at a job to begin with, or a certain tech, wrote up our vehicle health inspection, does not mean that tech's going to get the work. The work is going to go to the tech that is most qualified for it and is available at any one time. So with that in mind, we look at the tech view and we can see how many hours each tech has available to them or is assigned to them right now, how many they've completed for the day, and we can kind of prepare and stage cars based on, if those parts are here and what they specialize in, what they can do. And it just keeps everything flowing nice and easy. So they're not coming up and saying, hey, I'm out of work. What's another job can you give me? Or is this one approved? Well, no, that one's not approved. Well, do you have anything else? Well, no, I've got this other one that's, for Edgar that's been approved, but that's Edgar's job. We don't operate like that. Like I said, it's our goal is to get the customer taken care of, no matter who looked at the car. And my techs love that. There's no favoritism in jobs. It takes a lot of that out of it. So not one tech is saying, why is he getting all the work and not me? We don't have that because we assign just to everybody. But having the numbers on there as far as what jobs are completed, how many hours they have left, and what's available to them, everybody can see it. My service advisors can see it right away and saying, okay, I can bring in another car today because it doesn't look like we have, this tech's going to be wide open. So everybody knows what's going on at a glance, and there's no guessing game with it.
So for example, if we used Matt here, so Matt has 2.5 hours left and has 2.8 already finished as an example.
Correct. Yeah. If you see that, then, depending on what time of day it was, if it's, around this time of day, it's, 2:30 Central for us. And I know he's got 2.5 hours left. Matt typically leaves at, 4 o'clock. I don't think I can assign anything else to him that day. So I know Matt's cut off for the day, but if I look at some of the other techs, maybe I can give another tech a job that needs to get done right away or needs to get done by the end of the day.
Let's see. Please chat in your questions in case you have one. Let me see here. There was one in. So let's table that for the Q&A. And here's the workflow view. So John, how do you use this?
For the workflow view, it's, I mean, very similar to tech view. We know, and it's also that hit by the bus test. Everybody knows exactly where a car is in the process. You know, we know what cars are still waiting to be inspected. We know what cars are in creating estimate. You know, what is the estimator working on? So if for some reason a customer calls in and the service advisor, you know, answers the phone and the customer, hey, you know, I dropped my car off an hour ago. Where's it at in the process? The service advisor can immediately go over to workflow view and say, we're in the middle of creating the estimate. As soon as we get it done, we'll get that emailed text to you, and then we'll do a follow-up shortly after you have time to review it. And then, you know, we'll let you know what's going on, you know, and once the service advisor or our production manager estimator is done with it, they move it to estimate ready, and that signifies that the service advisor can start looking it over themselves to prepare their sales presentation to the customer. And then they move it to waiting for approval, which sends the inspection directly out to the customer. And then they can, you know, allow the customer time. And then, you know, then it goes into approved work. So everybody knows kind of what's been approved. So now we got to order parts on it. So then we've got a waiting for parts step. If we know parts are going to be out a while, and then we have a assigned to tech. So that means all the parts are here. This job is ready to give to a tech right now. So as soon as a tech comes available, we know what jobs are there, what jobs have all the parts here. So we're not trying to open up the RO or the parts here on this job. You know, if we have a tech that's coming up and that's going to need work, you know, we're not scrambling at the last second trying to figure out what can we give him. We already know what we can give him because it's already assigned to tech. And obviously, you know, waiting for work finish, they're working on it. And then we have a QC process to where, you know, once a car is done, it goes into our QC process and our shop foreman QCs all the cars. So it's, everybody knows exactly where the car is at every single step in the process. So no matter what happens, anybody can answer a phone and answer a simple question to a customer.
And so this assigned to tech is a special workflow step you have introduced because you do kind of a reevaluation of tech availability. Yes. It's not necessarily the same tech who Correct. Did the initial work order.
Correct, right? And that's why that came about, because it's not going to be the same tech. You know, it's also, you know, so we can reassign it need be, and like I said, make sure that the, you know, parts are here for the car. And, you know, as Bill, you know, just passed in the chat, you know, I do recommend our service advisors do have both the tech view and workflow view up at all times, and they switch back and forth between them, just so everybody can see everything.
Yes. Good. Make sure techs mark jobs as completed. So that's absolutely necessary, and it seems simple, and it's often a challenge because techs don't see necessarily the value of grabbing the tablet and mark a job as 100%. But through the real-time update on the work, and especially tech view, this way the service advisor or production manager can immediately see how much has been done and how much is more available.
Yeah, that's John, exactly the key. You know, to have those techs do that at certain times. Bill mentioned in the previous breakout, you know, his Dr. Pepper rule 10, 2, and 4 for the techs to do that. I recommend the techs to do that as soon as they get done with the job. Mark it 100% complete. That way we kind of know where they're at in the process, and we can start staging more work for them. You know, if they wait till the very last second to mark them all complete, we could be scrambling for work to assign them work. And it may not be a quick, you know, as them pulling a car out and then pulling back in, they may be waiting because we're trying to find work for them if they're not keeping it updated properly.
Yes, absolutely key. Let's go to the task manager. Oops. We again we deal with interrupts, and service advisors in the traditional role do often also the tech scheduling. And if you don't want to lose the hair or look like the guy on the picture, then we thought we are going to build something which helps the service advisor or every counter person for that matter to manage those interrupts better. Because recently those interrupts are less phone calls and yelling in the shop. It's more by digital communication, whether the techs have a question or request, or the boss or customers email or text in, right? And so we have this real habit, all of us, that we feel the most recent interrupt is automatically the most important one, right? You probably can all attest to it. And then we tend to drop everything, try to finish it, or we have to memorize it somewhere. Most of it lands in our brain somehow, or we write it on a post-it or put it on a work order. And so we felt that the analogy of a juggler is basically the best analogy to build something, like I said, we call task manager. And what you see here is a typical vehicle alert, which came back from the tech, where he basically said, I'm done with the inspection, right? That's what the interrupt was. And as you can see here, there is no yellow window anymore at the top corner. It will be flashing into your face as a service advisor or whoever. And then we apply, we read this and know what it is and automatically build a task. And the task is review inspection result, right? So even if you are not available to do the job, we will keep that in the system and remind whoever needs to do it. Right now, it's assigned to a service advisor, and it is automatically created. So our software reads the digital communication, and if we know what it means, we turn it automatically into a task. And so either you click on it, which takes you, in this case, immediately to the image editor and the inspection sheet, or if you don't, if you just recognize it and don't do anything about it, it gets queued in the so-called task manager. And we really highly advocate that it's not a good idea to make the most recent interrupt the most important one. Instead, manage the tasks and reprioritize if needed. Right, so here's a typical picture of the task manager. You are reminded as a counter person, there are two tasks pending here, right? One is review the inspection results, and another one, you can add as many tasks as you want manually. So if you're running your shop and you have a task for your service advisor, parts person, or whatever, you open the task manager and create a task. And then you define what the due time is, and then it gets put in the queue based on what the time is, right? And so this way, there's no need to write stuff down on a post-it anymore or forget it. Dropping balls should be a thing of the past. So we feel that is one of the biggest helping tools for a service advisor or a production manager. And what's really important to measure is if you want to use tech view and workflow view as John describes it, measure with the BCP, what is the average workflow move per RO? If this number is around 1, then the service advisor has not moved the vehicle much through the workflow view. It just went to waiting for inspection, and then at closeout, it vanished, right? This is a typical number around 4 or higher. Of course, it depends on how many workflow steps you have added. And then here is jobs completed on the tablet, which helps you tremendously to assess the willingness and ability of the tech to mark off those jobs. What we will add with the task manager is the average time for task completion per service advisor. So that allows you to, in the BCP, to see how long does it take to finish a task. So that will be a metric for how busy is the service advisor, and can the service advisor manage all the tasks which have been queued for him or her. So before we go to the summary, John, if you could talk about your production manager success. So the reason why John has not used the task manager yet is because we assign tasks to service advisors. John in his shop assigns to a production manager. And so as a turbo group, he will be able to use the task manager either end of this week or throughout next week, because then we allow to assign tasks not only to service advisors, but also to special roles like the production manager. John, help us understand what the production manager does in your shop.
Yeah, the production manager, some people call it estimator, some people even call it a parts person. It's all kind of all in one for us. Once the techs submit the inspection, they're the first ones. They start going through, they review it, they edit pictures, add any notes, make sure all the proper CAN jobs are in there. And once all that is done, then they'll import it into our management system and go through and create the estimate. Go through, make sure all the labor is correct, call our parts vendors if we need to call parts vendors, or use our management system to find the parts, and basically write the estimate. After that's done, they send it off to the service advisor, and it's in the service advisor's hands. Sometimes the service advisor might come back and say, hey, can you add this for me, or let's change this. We do that every now and then based off of the service advisor's conversation with the customer on it. And what's also real nice is the service, we're taking some of the emotion out of the pricing for the service advisor, because we all know sometimes the service advisors can get emotional about pricing and say, oh, wait a minute, this is kind of too high. We shouldn't mark up this part this much. We're taking that out because we have a separate person just doing that and taking care of all that. So once the service advisor contacts the customer, sells the job, they let the production manager know that the job has been sold, and it's up to the production manager to order the parts, whether it be online, or if we need to call into somebody, or use a repair link to order OEM parts. They get the parts ordered, move it over into the waiting for parts. Once all the parts come in, then they can move it into our next step and assign the work once the work is assigned to a technician. And that's pretty much what they handle for the most part. And it's a full day's job. And we're getting to the point where we've grown enough to where it's almost a 2-person job now, just because some of the parts issues and some of the times you got to spend on hold with the parts and handling returns and your cores. So I'm going to split that job up just a little bit here in the near future, just because of our size. Smaller shops, you can definitely get away with having one person do all that. And that's a full-time job, and that gives you your service advisor plenty of time to sell the job and build those relationships with customers. Because we found that once those service advisors have that time, it's directly reflected in our reviews. Our reviews in the almost 2 years since we've done this, it has gone from about 150 to right now we're almost at 600 Google reviews with a 4.8 rating. So I mean, it has really shot up our reviews just because our service advisors have time to build that relationship with those customers and make them feel all warm and fuzzy.
That is awesome. So how long did it take you to find a lubricated machine?
I I wouldn't say, we still have um, dry spots in our machine. Everything's not well lubricated still. I mean, it's always a work in process. Everything is always a work in process.
Right.
And it's not that I'm trying to tweak everything because I'm a tweaker per se. It's just, we need to find a good process so that I can duplicate. Because like I mentioned, we're opening up a second shop. I need to have a process that I can duplicate pretty
Right.
easily into there. We're very close, but it's taken, 5-6 years to really develop a good process using auto vitals. That process could be, pared down to a lot quicker nowadays because we have stuff lit just like what we're doing right now, where we have this online forum for everybody, and we're learning from people. I didn't learn from anybody. It's stuff I had to develop and go out on my own at the time. But now I'm trying to share my knowledge with people. There's other shop owners that are trying to share knowledge, so you guys can learn from that and develop these processes quicker and try and get, as Uwe says, well-oiled machines.
So, lessons learned from your process, what would be the top 3 things you advise other shops who want to implement something similar?
Oh, top 3 things. Take your time in finding the right person to run production and to do the estimating. It takes a special person. It's someone that's got to have a great head on their shoulders, got to be able to be very diligent. Um, they got to know parts. They do have to know a little bit of labor. And they've got to be real good on a computer because all our stuff is very computer oriented nowadays, especially with auto vitals. So just take your time, find that right person and work with them. Just don't throw them to the wolves. Spend some time, work with them, show them what to do. You got to have, your standing operating procedures in place. You got to know exactly what you're going to do step by step. And that's probably the biggest key, is having those standard operating procedures in place step by step. Who's responsible for what role? That way everybody knows exactly what's they're responsible for, what's expected of them. And then you can measure it and go back to them. I think that was only 2. I'm trying to think of another third one here.
I think they're both really big, and so let's just keep it at the 2, because it takes a concerted effort to implement that and make that role really successful. I would go to some Q&A. So here's a question by Bill. When you have the specialist, are they hourly, and is it part of the percentage of sale you would normally have for office staff, or how do you compensate?
Yeah, it's a commission-based position in our shop. I wouldn't say commission. Commission is the wrong word. That's kind of a dirty word in my opinion. But it's, they do make a percentage of gross profit dollars is what it is. So they're tasked with making sure, we're finding a great part at a reasonable price and putting it through our matrix and making sure the labor is correct and making sure we're having the right amount of labor on there, making sure all the parts are on the ticket that we need initially. So we're not going back, and adding parts on at zero cost because somebody doesn't want to call the, the service advisor doesn't want to call the customer again and say, hey, I had to add a $50 part on here because we forgot. So it is a position, that we do pay off of gross profit dollars is, what I found the best success for us.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, time flew. We're done with this session. I wish we had at least another 45 minutes. John, thank you very much for your insights.
You're welcome.
I think a lot of people have their pencils out, and again, everybody, if you haven't downloaded this presentation, you can go to autovitals.com/printouts and download PDFs of all presentations and make notes and take that to your shop and talk to the team to implement that. Thank you very much for joining us. Stay on for the outlook into what the turbo shops are using. Starts in 15 minutes in the same room, or go back to the panel discussion. You can jump back and forth as you wish, because everything is going to be available as a recording. And you will hear John also talk on the panel in 15 minutes, together with Thomas Richardson and Sarah Savio, about the experience with the new version when we call them the Turbo Group. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, John.
Thank you, guys.